Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June Fascia Study Group. I'm so glad to be here with you today to talk about fascia. Fun little nugget of truth is in some of the research that came out in the early 2000s, we discovered that fascia is home to 10 times or more as many nerve endings as in muscle. So fascia, when we talk about pain, when we talk about things that feel good, 10 times as many nerve endings arguably are in the fascia as in the muscle. What that means is if we can learn to talk to and include fascia in our movement and in our work, magical things seem to start to happen. So that's what we're going to do an experiential bit of work around today. And I'm going to share my screen briefly to talk about our theme for what we're going to be working with. So first things first, I will choose this one and I will choose this one. And we are going to the end, but we're coming to the beginning. And I will share it in the best way that is easy to see. So the theme for this month is what I like to call the fascial net worth. Oftentimes net worth is considered in terms of dollars and assets, meaning what you own versus what you owe. And something that all of us own that maybe very few of us think about is our fascial net worth. So I met with this wonderful woman who is an accountant that helps people get out of debt in the Western Massachusetts area. And one of the things waiting in the wings that I thought would be fun would be to do a radio discussion with her on what I like to call crouching tiger, hidden 401k. And what I was thinking about is, wouldn't it be cool to check in with people about their physical bodies as one of their assets of their net worth? The other reason that it's a fun pun is because the fascia exists in the body as a continuous sheet. It's a full net, meaning that every movement I do could potentially involve this whole fascial net in an organized way. And that's what we're going to really be diving into today with our exercises that we're going to do. So first things first, we're going to move into the details. We'll be doing some movement exercises in a moment. And the way we'll do it is it's going to be experience first, talk about it later. I think that's a fun way to learn, and it helps just to bring it into body awareness so that we can be in our heads about it later. And it's nice to just see, what does my body do? How does my body respond to the exercises that we're doing? First things first, I'd love to know if you want to share, you can either type it into the chat or you can say aloud. Are there any areas as you tune into your body at the moment that have your attention? Any things that you want me to know about that we're not going to be doing much that's particularly rigorous, but any body things happening today that you would want to share about? Okay, yep, so I see one of us is pointing on the screen to a shoulder, and I can tune in as I tune into my own body. I'm aware of the back of my right knee, feels like it could use a little love, and a little bit my sacrum feels like it could use some appreciation. And certainly if anything doesn't feel good, stop, slow down, let me know, and we can work on helping things feel more comfortable. And of course, is there anywhere as you tune in, maybe this question hasn't been one that you've asked yourself, any places that feel particularly good to you? I like that laugh. I heard a laugh. So I would say for myself that I feel particularly good in my hips. I did a great workout this morning with one of my colleagues in the office here, and we did a lot of nice hip movement work and some squats. So my hips are feeling particularly good after all that nourishing movement. And any other things that might feel good. It's, by the way, just tuning in to what feels good and investigating that question is good work for the brain. And it's something that I would recommend doing every single day, is tuning in, because it's, I would say, sometimes a habit, be it cultural or habitual from some other place, to focus on or experience or notice more what hurts than what feels good, I like to offer a bit of a counterpoint to look at and say, what feels also good? Is there a way that I can strengthen the part of my brain that looks for the good? And the answer is yes. And I feel like every rep in that direction is a good rep. So things to think about moving forward as we're in the time today, and then as we go along in life. Okay, so the next thing, our first exercise. I'm going to take, so the first exercise is called the slow motion spring. And I'm going to put this on video so you can see what my body is doing more easily. So I'm going to just briefly stop the share. And let's see. All right, so what I'm going to suggest, you can either do it sitting or standing. It might be a little easier to do standing. And I'm going to adjust my screen a little bit so that you can see more of my torso. And I'll stand back a little bit. So I'll demonstrate it first. The first thing you want to do, if you're standing, I'm going to have you put a soft bend in your knees. And then if you're sitting, I'm going to have you slide to the edge of your chair and really feel your sitting bones underneath you. So if you're standing, I'll invite you to have a soft bend in your knees. And then what you're going to do is you're going to act like you're going to straighten your legs. You can straighten them a little, but then don't do it all the way. So you're going to act like you're straightening your legs, but don't. And what you want to feel when you do that is that your core starts to engage a little bit. And if I can get a thumbs up from some of you in the audience, can you feel that? Yep. Groovy. So play around with that for a minute. This is the pre-slow motion spring. So from here, you're going to just let everything relax. And then you're going to act like you're going to straighten your knees, but don't. Because right now you have a soft bend in your knees. Awesome. So now that you have that, you're going to keep a little bit of that engagement. And now you're going to literally act like a slow motion spring. So you're going to slowly quill. So here you're going to have a little bit more of a knee bend. And you're going to slowly lengthen, keeping that engagement in your core. And you can always feel free to reset if you need to. If you feel like you've lost it, then you can just start again by just softening your knees and act like you're going to straighten, but don't. And then you can resume with the exercise where you're lengthening through the top of your spine. And then you're going to come back down and sink. And then take a few moments to play around with what this feels like. And I'd invite you to have a bit of a diffuse awareness, kind of just see what it would feel like to be kind of aware of everything. And it may be a little bit different or unusual to move this slowly. And then as you feel like you've gotten that, see what it would be like to take this into a little bit of walking around. So as you walk, it's almost like you're going to be on a slow motion carousel where you're lowering and lifting. And I'm going to stay pretty well near the screen just so you can see what I'm doing. But feel free to walk around your room. Again, noticing whatever it is that you notice. It may be that you don't notice anything in particular, which is perfectly normal. And it may be that you can detect something going on, but it may not be obvious what exactly that is. Good. And then taking a few more slow motion springs. When you're ready, where it feels like you have a good place where you could do a pause, you can come back to your screen and that will let me know that we get a chance to check in. And so, question, how was that? Any things that were particularly noteworthy?
That I also have a knee issue.
Uh-huh. And what does that look like? What are you noticing?
Oh, just kind of stiffness, I guess. That my whole left side is kind of
Okay.
So I don't know what. I had surgery, 30 years ago. So whether it's scar tissue or I don't think it's arthritis, but
And
it makes me not want to do like squat type things. But
sure,
I should.
sure.
I guess I probably should.
Well, it's a good question. Maybe too soon to tell what the best first thing would do or would be to do. What's good about and what I like about this exercise is that it's a nice diagnostic as well as an opportunity to start to tune into what the fascia feels like. And if there's a place where there's an interruption of some kind in the system, it's likely to tell you about it. And it's also low impact. So it's nice to be able to tune in a way that is more subtle and gentle to say, oh, I might have a little bit of a spot that needs a little extra attention. So great that you're aware, and also thank you for letting me know, and we can modify accordingly how we do today.
Mm-hmm.
And what I can say from my own experience doing this exercise is that typically a few reps into it, I notice two big things, and this is consistent in terms of telling me that I'm starting to get in touch with my fascia. One is that I tend to take a bit of a deeper breath naturally, which is a really good feeling. It adds oxygen to my system, and that's always nice. The other thing that happens that I find fascinating is that it feels like my peripheral vision starts to get softer and more available, which is pretty neat, that my vision changes just from doing this exercise. And it happens every time, which is pretty fun. So I like to offer some possibilities after we do it, because I don't want to like plant the seed too early on what might be possible. And things to look for, again, are where does this feel good to me, and where am I noticing things that feel like, again, they may need a little extra help. And we can talk about the knee at a later point in terms of some suggestions that can be future pacing. There's some ideas about that might be helpful. So glad to know. Okay. So I'm going to come back to sharing my screen, and we'll get to the next adventure, the next exercise. So the next one is what we like to call the human metronome. And the human metronome, a little different than the spring. Exactly. Yes. So we're going to be in a different trajectory now. So now we're going to be going side to side, and you can be in whatever position you want. You can sit, you can stand, whatever's comfortable. And the way we're going to do it, I'll explain it first, and then I'll do it on the screen, and you can start to experiment as we go. The way we'll do it is that you're going to start with a little bit of a bigger side to side lean. And then you're going to slowly come to a place where if someone were looking on, they would almost not even be able to tell you were moving. So you're slowly tuning into how little can I move while still creating movement. And so that's going to be this second exercise. And the goal is, while you're doing that, to tune in and see any sensations that you notice in your body. And so here on screen, just so you can see a little more easily, here I'm standing, but you could do it seated, and you can start moving side to side. You can really, tilt yourself. You might feel your abdominals working to hold you. And here I'm noticing in myself, I just naturally start to take a deeper breath. Something about this simple engagement of fascia, my body loves. It's like, oh, we're doing that thing again. This feels great. And now here, my pace is fairly fast. So what happens if I stay with the same range, but slow it down? Whoa. I don't know what I'm feeling, but I'm definitely feeling it. And it feels kind of good. in my own body, what I'm noticing is just as I slow down, is I feel calmer. Not that I was not calm before, but I feel calmer. And I also feel, again, just like I can see everything. My eyes feel softer. But it's definitely a different experience than when I'm actively looking at things. Okay, and now I'm going to make my range smaller. And I'm also going to slow down. Just noticing whatever it is that I notice or don't notice. Maybe something, it may be nothing. Good. And then pause for a moment. And we're going to do a few more of these side to sides. But just pause and take in, how do I feel right now? Maybe different from before, maybe the same. Good, and then see about moving into a little bit of movement again. And then coming back to how small can I make the movement while still moving? So it's not very muscular, but it's much more subtle and much more holistic in terms of the movement. Because it's less of that muscular efforting, it can be easier to tune into the fascia. Great. And then take a pause and let all of that imagery go, let all of that movement go. It takes a little bit of focus to do all of that. And then any things that you noticed on that round.
Relaxing. Yeah.
Very relaxing. Yeah. My nervous system, if it could speak English, it would probably say something like, I'd like to feel like this all the time. Yeah, there's a way that this immediately can settle and serve to settle the whole nervous system, which I love because it's something that I can do anywhere, anytime. And particularly if I've been in pain or if I'm working my way out of pain and it's been a harder day, I may not have the bandwidth to do all of my exercises, or I may just be limited in what I'm up for. I can always do this. I can do it lying down. I can do it sitting still. I can visualize it. That's the other thing, is even if I don't feel like moving at all, just visualizing this, you're going to find is going to create some good activity in the body. So that's another fun nugget that I have learned along the way. That actually came from a study that was featured in a book called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. And what they referenced is that when they did a study on people exercising their muscles, they had a group that visualized exercise and a group that actually did exercise. And what they discovered was, I think the ratio was that 22% muscle development was on the group that physically did it, 18% on the group that visualized it and didn't even do any movement. That blew my mind. I was like, okay, something magical is going on with visualization. So that's a little bit of a nod towards, even if I physically am not in a space to do a whole lot, visualizing alone can be medicine for the body. So another worthwhile nugget. Let me share my screen again. And before I go to the next exercise, any observations additionally? All right, so we're going to then move along to the next one. So the theme for the day, net worth. So we've gotten a chance to move in more of a subtle way. And what we're up to now is we're going to come actually back to both of these exercises. You can free form with them in any way you want, with the idea that while you're moving, see if you can visualize this net of fascia. And I'm going to actually get my fascial net that I had before I started the recording, and I'll show you up close in a minute. The goal, the idea is if you were to visualize that you were covered in a whole net of fascia that started at your feet and went all the way up to your head as a continuous unit, the goal in your movement is see if you can activate that whole net, meaning that you can get the whole net to participate. So as you're moving, in your mind's eye, you're holding this idea of this beautiful, gorgeous, call it like sparkly, glittery, wonderful net that is holding and supporting you. And you're completely covered, you're completely surrounded in the best way with support from this system. Two fun things about it that are worth noting, and you can feel free as you like to start moving. Again, we've got our slow motion spring, which is where we're sinking and slowly lifting. And we've got our metronome, which is where we're going side to side. And this time, you're envisioning this net is going to be moving with you. So let me stop my share to then feature what I always find fun to do, which is to cover myself with this net. We'll see if it behaves itself. Sometimes it doesn't. But if you can imagine that we have this whole net covering our body, and that when I move, if I activate something here, you can see that the whole net responds. So if you imagine that I'm moving my muscles, this whole wonderful system is moving along with me and is participating in the movement. And it has different qualities than muscle does. I would say the oversimplified way to describe it is that the fascia tends to really stabilize and support the whole structure, much like a net would, hence the net worth. And the muscles tend to, I would say, handle some of the faster movement. It's not entirely that way, but for our purposes today and feeling that whole net, seeing if we can feel and tune into our fascia and see what happens when we do, that's what we're going to be doing now. So at your leisure, and I'm going to do some of the movements. You can kind of do them in any order that feels good to you. This is a big experiment, and getting used to experimenting is a big part of healing. So that's another nugget. And just see, can I feel my whole body? Can I be aware of my whole structure while I do this? All the while visualizing this beautiful net that maybe I didn't even know was really there before. Maybe it's finally like, she sees me. She knows. And one thing I'm experiencing that I'll point out just as I'm going, and you can feel free to notice and say things as you go. One thing I'm definitely experiencing is I feel my legs more. I'm just aware of my feet. I'm aware of my calves, and it's good. It's a good feeling to be a little more aware of myself than before. And I'm especially aware of the soles of my feet. I feel like they could do anything I want right now. And any things that you're noticing? This is tiring work. This is a lot of attention to be paid. And the fun is, what is it going to be like for the rest of your day, having had a chance to tune in so specifically? And that'll be another invitation. I'll be curious to hear any ahas or any things that you notice. And so you can take another pause, another well-earned pause, letting all of that go. And say, how does that all feel? And if you want, you could do a little walkabout. I'll, again, sort of stay on the screen. I won't go too far. just tune in and see, is there anything that you notice? And there may be nothing, there may be something. It could be obvious, it could be subtle. Yeah, sometimes just that little bit of focused attention can be a nice experience. It might be nothing particularly grand, but it might be just, wow, there's so much happening. And any particular things you're aware of? So I'll start to share my screen once more. And we'll talk a little bit through a little bit about what we did, what our goals are, what we're aiming for. And I've said it, and I think it bears repeating, that moving as a unit is a helpful thing to do. And the more I can be aware of where all my body parts are, and the more organized I can be with my movement, the more medicinal my movement gets to be. And it's a core belief that I have that all movement that we do can be supportive and nourishing to the body. And it's something that I think the more I learn about how to move well, and the more I can tune into what feels good as I move, the more that knowledge is going to come with me every day, to where I may not have to think about it quite so consciously, but that it becomes second nature is the goal. And again, being able to have good body mechanics, moving well, moving in a connected way, tends to help me feel better. And it helps me to move in the way that my body was built to move. And also to learn when my body may need a little extra help. So in the beginning, when there was the issue feeling a little bit of pressure by the knee, pressure by the shoulder, these are clues that the body says to say, oh, hey, could use a little help over here. And the nice thing is to start to build an arsenal of information to say, okay, what are those things then that I can do? And what's my decision tree about which exercise when? And, is it just that I need to move as a unit, and that's my solution to helping my body feel better? Because sometimes that's it. So it's nice to know, and nice to, again, experiment. It's the best way to find out. And definitely to be able to find out through movement. It proves it to the brain, like what's helpful, which brings us to some of our next points. So what we just did and what we're aiming to do with learning about fascia is something that I'm calling the 4 fascia system. And the deal is that the more I tune in, the goal is the more I tune in, the more positive change I may notice, as well as all of the other things that are also in my awareness. So yes, I may have some stiffness going on in my body. What about where I feel good? What's happening there? And the more I build my reference points for what feels good, the more likely I am to keep feeling when I'm better, if I am recovering from an injury, which is a really cool thing, is to notice when I'm better. So the way that I like to do this, the system and the purpose of the system, is to start by first doing what we did, which was tuning in before we do anything. Say, what do I notice before I even start moving? And then we do a bit of this is where we do our pre-movement evaluation to say, okay, well, if I did notice anything, what did I notice? And what specifically is going on? And then we did our slow movement exploration. We did a few exercises today. We did our slow motion spring, our human metronome, and then combining it all together with visualization of the whole net of fascia. And then at the end, after we did our slow movement, we did a reevaluation to say, did I notice anything different? And in fact, during the movement, do I notice anything changing? Do I notice anything shifting as I go? I feel like it's worth repeating often, and it seems like it never gets old, is to compare before and after. Anytime that I'm exploring a new movement, a new exercise, a new anything, it's nice as much as possible to see what it does and to see how helpful it is. I tend to love the exercises best that that I can get an immediate difference before and after I do it, because it makes it so that it's much more likely that I'm going to do it again. So it makes it easier to build the habit of doing the exercise regularly, which I think is phenomenal, because if I know that it's helpful, if I prove to my brain that it's helpful, because there's a part of the brain that needs proving, that needs me to prove myself to it. So the brain is like a jury. You know, if I can prove right off the bat that I did an exercise and seconds after I did it, I got a change, my brain is much more likely to remind me to do it every day. And a lot of the times it's that daily habit that can be the most important to develop in a healing arc and in getting better if something's not feeling great. And I love how one of my friends put it. He said, I want to create an environment that is inhospitable to bad habits. Or maybe even, I think he even said a stronger word. He said, I want to create an environment that's hostile to bad habits. And one habit that I can think of is the anti-habit, meaning that I might do, if I'm slated to do some exercises for myself on a daily basis, I might do them one day and then forget about it the next, and then maybe do it a couple days later, and then maybe not the next day. If I can create an environment where I rely on a chunk of time during the day that I always have dedicated, that can be a really helpful way to counteract some of the forgetfulness around some of these exercises. But then again, to be able to make sure I'm paying enough attention when I do them to notice what helped me the most. It helps me assess, how do I get as productive as possible with any therapy that I'm doing to help myself? And of course, please remember that you're brilliant. This, if there were one takeaway from today, my favorite part of my job in helping people to get out of pain and into better health is to remind everyone how brilliant their systems are. It always, and I see this consistently, takes far less time to get out of pain than it often ever does to get into it. There are exceptions to that rule, and still a lot of the time it's a lot easier to get well than it is to get into trouble. And that being said, time and time again, when people do daily practices to feel better, it is amazing to watch how different daily practices versus, every other day. It's an exponential difference in terms of how much gain can be made. One, because the repetition is good. Two, because of the insights that show up from daily practice. You find ways to refine the exercise, make it work better for you. And it's helpful in terms of repeating for the practice of, again, getting into the habit of feeling what's there, which helps, by the way, stay ahead of problems before they start as well. And the cosmic joke is that we never know what we avoid. And so sometimes it's hard to tell how well we're actually doing. So it is my job that I consider to remind you of how brilliant you are. And so I'm glad I can do it again here and today. So this is what I have for today's June study group. And I love doing this work. I love sharing about fascia and keeping it simple. And so every month, if you have questions, if you have things going on and you want a forum to be able to talk about it and, again, troubleshoot anything or feel, hey, I have this idea, I have this insight, this is a great place to do it. And I meet with everyone. There's a monthly study group you can sign up for on the website, and anyone that you think might have fun. It is a group that I run the third Friday of every month from 2 to 3. And there is, of course, a recording that I can always send. So before we close for today, any final questions? And then I'll stop the recording and you can ask all the real questions. All right. Well, we'll pause the recording here. Thank you again so much to those of you that were able to join in person, and then for those of you joining on recording, and we'll see you next month. And let me just hit pause on the recording.